The courtroom was quiet except for the faint scratch of pens and the murmuring shuffle of papers. I had just stepped inside, dressed in a navy blue suit, my badge deliberately tucked away. This wasn't a publicity visit. I was here to observe, anonymously, before my new position officially began next week. From the back of the room, I spotted the officer almost immediately. Broad-shouldered, buzz-cut, and radiating the kind of authority that leaned more into intimidation than discipline. Officer Granger. I'd already read his file. The judge was running late, and the tension was building between Granger and a young man waiting for a hearing. Something sparked, a low word exchanged, maybe, and then Granger snapped. I barely moved closer when he suddenly turned toward me, his face flushed and voice rising. "You can't be standing there. Out, now," he barked. I raised my hand calmly. "I'm here for professional." He didn't listen. Granger stepped forward and grabbed my arm, firm grip, fingers digging into my coat sleeve. The room froze. All eyes turned. I heard a woman in the front row gasp. He yanked me slightly, forcing me to stumble half a step. "Didn't you hear me? This isn't a tour." "Step outside now, Officer Granger," I said, my voice low but cutting through the room like a bell. "Let go of me." Immediately. He hesitated, barely, but still didn't recognize me. I don't take orders from random. At that moment, the courtroom doors opened. Captain Lyles walked in. His eyes locked on the scene. On me. On Granger's hand still clutching my arm. And his entire face dropped. "Officer Granger," the captain barked. "Let her go. Now." Granger looked confused but obeyed. "What's going on?" The captain didn't answer him. He stepped forward quickly and addressed me with a tight nod of respect. "Deputy Chief Jameson. I didn't expect you until next week." The silence was deafening. Granger's face went white. The grip on my arm loosened so fast I nearly lost balance again. Granger stumbled back a step. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked from me to Captain Lyles, then back again, clearly trying to piece things together. I adjusted my blazer, calmly smoothing it out, my eyes never leaving his. Captain Lyles was already at my side. "My apologies, ma'am," he said under his breath, but loud enough for the courtroom to hear. "He didn't know." "I gathered," I replied, voice cool and professional. The entire room was frozen, like the air had been sucked out. Even the court clerk's hand hovered mid-air, not daring to continue typing. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Granger finally spoke, voice quiet, unsteady. I didn't realize." "No," I said. "You didn't." I stepped closer. Not aggressively. But deliberately, so he would hear every word clearly. "You didn't ask who I was. You didn't introduce yourself. You didn't follow protocol. You grabbed someone in a courtroom because you didn't recognize them and assumed they didn't belong." He swallowed hard. "I thought you were interrupting a proceeding, ma'am," I cut him off with a raised hand. "I wasn't. I was observing. Legally. Professionally. I'm not just your new superior, Officer Granger." I leaned in slightly. "I'm the one reviewing your behavior reports for the last 12 months. His eyes widened. "You had no idea who I was," I added. "But you treated me exactly how you treat anyone you believe can't fight back. That's a pattern. And it ends today." Captain Lyles shifted uncomfortably. I turned to him. "I'll need access to all bodycam footage from this morning. And I want a meeting with Internal Affairs by the end of the day." "Yes, ma'am," he said immediately. I glanced back at Granger. "You're dismissed from courtroom duty until further notice. Leave." Granger didn't move at first. Then he turned slowly and walked out, the sound of his boots on the floor loud in the otherwise silent courtroom. As the door shut behind him, a woman whispered from the back, "She's the new chief?" And I finally let the faintest smile touch my lips. "Yes," I said, loud enough for them all to hear this time. "I am." After Granger left the courtroom, the atmosphere didn't immediately return to normal. In fact, it never would. I stood still for a moment, letting the weight of what just happened settle. Then I turned back to Captain Lyles, whose face was a mixture of unease and curiosity. He knew this wasn't just about one officer's behavior, it was about the culture he'd been overseeing. And I had just sent a message through the entire precinct. "I'll handle the rest of the hearing later," I told him. "Right now, I want to see his previous incident reports. Everything that hasn't been filed up the chain." Captain Lyles nodded and motioned for a deputy to escort me to the precinct records room. As we walked, I noticed how every officer I passed avoided direct eye contact, some embarrassed, others clearly nervous. Good. In the records room, I found exactly what I expected. Granger had 5 complaints in the last 9 months. All dismissed. Every time, the justification had been vague: reasonable force, non-compliance, officer felt threatened. But the witnesses said otherwise. Sloppy behavior. Excessive force. Aggression without cause. It had been brushed under the rug again and again. And now, with one unfortunate mistake, Granger had pulled the rug off himself, and everything hiding underneath it. I stood there, flipping through the pages of complaint summaries, and said quietly to the deputy beside me, "How many of these did Lyles see?" The deputy hesitated. I don't know if he ever reviewed the full documents. I closed the file. He's going to. Later that day I sat across from Internal Affairs with the folder on the table between us. I didn't waste time on formalities. "This isn't about punishing one officer," I began. "It's about cleaning house." They leaned in, listening closely. "I'm not here to be a figurehead. I've already been mistaken, grabbed, and silenced in my first hour here, and it told me everything I need to know about how this department views power and presence." I tapped the file once. "Start with this. There's more. And I'll be watching." By the next morning, the precinct was buzzing. Not loudly, no one dared speak too openly, but the tension was in the air like static. Every hallway conversation dropped to a murmur when I walked by. Every casual laugh died mid-breath. They weren't used to someone like me. Not just because I was new. Because I wasn't pretending. I held meetings with department heads, walked unannounced into briefing rooms, and quietly observed officers during roll calls. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I simply watched, and they felt it. Word had already spread about what happened in the courtroom. Some exaggerated it. Some downplayed it. But no one denied it. And no one could ignore it. Especially not Officer Granger. He'd been reassigned to desk duty pending the investigation, but I made it a point to pass through the admin floor that afternoon. When I did, he stood awkwardly behind the front counter, shuffling paperwork he clearly didn't know how to file. His eyes darted up the moment he saw me. He straightened. "Chief Jameson," he said, voice flat. I stopped in front of him, calm and measured. "Officer Granger." He waited. Maybe hoping for some sort of signal that everything was going to blow over. That I'd let it slide. "I reviewed the footage," I said. "You had your hand on me for 4.5 seconds. He blinked. That's not the number that bothers me," I interrupted. "It's how long it took after I gave a direct verbal order for you to let go." He looked down. No defense. Just silence. That pause, I continued, told me more about your mindset than any file ever could. I placed a folded document on the counter between us. Mandatory retraining. Full behavioral review. Probationary period. You complete all of it, you stay. You skip one session, you're done. He didn't say anything at first. Then, quietly, why give me a second chance? I leaned in just slightly. Because I don't believe in destroying people, Granger. I believe in rebuilding departments. But I don't hand out chances easily. Then I turned and walked away. Behind me, the precinct stayed quiet. No applause. No drama. But something shifted. A reckoning had begun. By the end of the week, I had established 3 things: every officer knew my name, and my position. No one was above the new code of conduct I'd rolled out. The days of unchecked power plays were over. But it wasn't enough to correct the problem. I had to change the standard. So I scheduled a mandatory precinct-wide address for Monday morning. No excuses. Every rank. Every face. When I stepped up to the podium in the briefing hall, the room was packed. Rows of officers, captains, deputies, even clerical staff, all seated, all waiting. Some with folded arms, some with nervous energy. A few still carried a trace of quiet defiance in their posture. I let the silence sit for a full 5 seconds before speaking. My name is Deputy Chief Maya Jameson, I began. And unlike many who've stood here before, I wasn't appointed to maintain tradition. I saw a few eyebrows raise. I was brought here to dismantle it, and rebuild something better. No one moved. You know what happened in that courtroom. I'm not here to revisit it. I'm here because the way some of you carry this badge has made it harder for all of you to do the job with dignity. A murmur swept through the back row. I continued. We are public servants. Not private enforcers. We don't get to decide who deserves respect based on appearance, tone, or whether we recognize them. We serve. Period. I paused, letting that sink in. From this day forward, every officer will undergo new assessment training, designed not just for tactics, but for temperament. Leadership begins with accountability, and it starts now. I held up a sealed folder. This contains the names of officers under preliminary review. If your name's not in here, that's not a free pass, it means you still have time to rise before you fall. A heavy silence spread through the room. But this time, I saw something else. Reflection. Maybe even respect. As I stepped down from the podium, Captain Lyles met me at the stairs. He gave me a short nod, one that meant more than words. Not everyone clapped. I didn't want applause anyway. I wanted change. And I had just lit the fuse. Later that afternoon, I found myself in a closed-door meeting with Internal Affairs, Captain Lyles, and 2 city attorneys. The mood was cautious, but focused. There's been a sharp drop in community complaints this week, one of the attorneys noted. That's unusual. Not unusual, I corrected. It's the result of accountability. People sense when something shifts. Captain Lyles nodded. The department's been on edge, but it's a productive edge. Officers are thinking twice before reacting. That's new. I turned to the IA lead. What's the timeline on the Granger review? She flipped a page in her folder. His retraining starts Monday. Surveillance footage confirms he didn't recognize you and reacted based on assumption, not threat. Which makes it worse, I said flatly. She nodded. Agreed. That's why the review won't just be about Granger, it'll open a wider investigation into how that type of behavior went unchecked. That was what I wanted to hear. This wasn't about me being grabbed in a courtroom. It was about why that felt normal to him. Why grabbing anyone without cause felt justified. Why no one stepped in. I leaned forward. After this case, I want a full audit of internal complaints and dismissals from the last 3 years. No more missing files. No more vague language. One of the attorneys looked uneasy. That's a deep dive. Exactly, I said. Lyles spoke up again. If she hadn't been the incoming chief, none of this would have come to light. And he was right. That's what haunted me the most. If I had been anyone else, just an ordinary observer, or someone who didn't push back, how far would that moment have gone? What about the others? I stood to leave. This isn't personal anymore, I told them. This is structural. And as I walked out of the room, I knew it, I wasn't just cleaning up a department. I was setting the tone for every officer who ever thought no one was watching. Over the next several days, the precinct felt different. Not calmer, more like restrained. Watchful. As if the walls themselves had started listening. The retraining sessions began, and I insisted on attending the first one in person. Not as an observer. As a participant. The officers didn't expect that. When I walked into the training room, dressed not in a blazer, but in a standard Navy uniform with my badge fully visible, there were more than a few double takes. Officer Granger sat near the back, posture stiff, eyes forward. He didn't dare look at me. The instructor began with a question: what makes you react to someone before they've even spoken? No one answered at first. Then someone near the front said, instinct. The instructor shook his head. No. That's a cop-out. Instinct is trained. Conditioned. Taught. What you call instinct is just a shortcut you learned a long time ago. A long silence. Then, and those shortcuts. They get people hurt. I could feel the weight of those words settle across the room like lead. The instructor turned to me. Chief, care to comment? I stood slowly, scanning the group. Everyone in this room has power. But too many of you have forgotten what that power feels like to the people on the other side of it. Eyes dropped. Faces tightened. I walked slowly through the rows as I spoke. You don't get to claim authority and then act surprised when people hold you accountable for how you use it. You don't get to say, I was doing my job, when you never bothered to ask yourself how you were doing it. I reached the back of the room and paused near Granger's seat. He finally looked up. Change is uncomfortable, I said. So get uncomfortable. I returned to my seat. The room was silent. But it was the right kind of silence. The kind that came just before people started to think, really think, for the first time in a long while. By the end of that week, the precinct's daily rhythm had shifted. Nothing explosive. No grand confrontations. Just quiet recalibration, like a machine learning how to run without grinding its own gears. Officers were more deliberate in their speech. Body language softened in public interactions. Reports came in with fewer incidents of force. The difference wasn't just visible, it was felt. But not everyone was happy about it. Late Friday afternoon, I received an anonymous envelope on my desk. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper: you embarrassed one of our own in public. You think fear equals respect. Good luck running a department with your back turned. I didn't flinch. I read it once. Then again. And finally, I pinned it to the inside of my office door. Not to hide it. To remind anyone who entered that resistance wasn't a sign of failure, it was proof we were finally hitting a nerve. That evening, I called a meeting with Captain Lyles and the Internal Affairs Supervisor. I received a note, I told them simply. Cowardly, unsigned, but clear enough. There are still people in this building who think accountability is an attack. Lyles frowned. You want us to investigate? No, I said. I want us to move faster. The IA supervisor raised an eyebrow. Faster? Yes. We accelerate the evaluations. We expand the training. We audit the entire disciplinary process from top to bottom. And if someone pushes back harder? Lyles asked. I looked him square in the eye. Then they're not resisting change. They're resisting leadership. And I'm not here to be liked. Silence. Then a slow nod from both of them. I leaned back in my chair. That's how we rebuild trust, from the inside out. Outside my window, the last rays of sun dipped below the skyline. This wasn't just about Granger anymore. Or the courtroom. Or me. This was the start of something bigger. Something irreversible. The following Monday, a patrol officer named Ruiz stopped me in the hallway. Mid-30s, solid reputation, mostly kept to himself. I hadn't interacted with him much, until now. "Chief," he said, eyes a little uncertain. "Got a minute?" I paused. "Go ahead." He looked down the hall to make sure no one was listening. "Just wanted to say, a few of us noticed what you're doing. The shift. It's uncomfortable, yeah, but it's overdue." I studied him for a second. "You sure you're not just saying that because I'm wearing the stars?" He chuckled softly. "No, ma'am. I'm saying it because I've got a sister who got shoved by a cop for raising her voice during a traffic stop. And it wasn't me who did it, but it could have been one of us. And we let that slide for too long." I nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me." He stepped back, but not before adding, "You've got more people behind you than you think. Even if we're quiet about it, for now." That moment stuck with me more than I expected. Because quiet support was still support. And it meant the message was getting through. Later that day, Internal Affairs concluded their investigation into Granger's record. 4 of his 5 previous complaints, previously dismissed, were reopened. In at least 2, witnesses had been dissuaded from submitting formal statements by a now-retired sergeant. We were uncovering rot. But with every file we opened, we also created a chance to rebuild trust, not just among the officers, but with the public who had stopped believing that any of this would ever change. I scheduled a press conference. Not to parade punishment, but to show transparency. Standing at the podium outside the precinct, I addressed the cameras. "We are actively reviewing internal cases that should have been handled with more care, more honesty, and more courage. This isn't about one officer. It's about the culture we allow to grow." Then I looked straight into the lens. We are not here to protect power. We're here to protect the people. No script. No slogans. Just truth. The kind that leaves no room to hide. The press conference made waves. Local news picked it up first. Then regional outlets. A few national voices even took interest, not because it was scandalous, but because it wasn't. There were no viral videos. No leaked footage. No shouting matches. Just quiet, steady reform. That made it even more powerful. Back at the precinct, things weren't perfect, but they were progressing. Granger, now deep into his retraining, had stopped avoiding eye contact. He still walked like someone wearing weight on his shoulders, but it was different now. Less denial. More understanding. I watched him from my office window one afternoon as he helped a young rookie navigate paperwork. Patiently. Respectfully. People can change, I thought. If you force them to look in the mirror long enough. But more importantly, systems can change, if someone demands it. Captain Lyle stopped by that evening with a printed report. Complaint numbers are down. Response times are tighter. Civilian feedback's trending up. I nodded. That's good. He hesitated. Then added, some of the old guard. They're still grumbling behind closed doors. I looked at him. Let them grumble. That's the sound of walls coming down. He smiled. And I finally exhaled. The courtroom incident, that moment when Granger grabbed my arm without hesitation, had once felt like a humiliation. Now, it was the moment everything started. Not because I shouted back. But because I stayed calm, stood firm, and let the truth expose itself. In the end, he wasn't the story. The system was. And I had just rewritten its first chapter.